Hello guys, how are we all doing? Welcome back to yet another video. Today we're doing a big one. We're going to be predicting where I see each championship club being in the next 5 years. Before we get into this video though guys, make sure you've all slapped a thumbs up on this one, subscribed if you're new, and let's talk about the teams. Right, so how this video is going to work is I've got 4 tiers on the left hand side here. Premier League, Championship, League 1, and League 2. I could have added National League, but I very much doubt that any teams in the Championship this season will be in the National League in 5 years' time. So then, all the Championship teams this season are scattered across the bottom in alphabetical order. I will be going through each Championship team, talking about why I think they will be in each division in 5 years' time. And we're going to come back to this video in 2026 and see how accurate I was. So let's get started. Let's start with Barnsley Football Club then. As you can see through their history, they've been up and down the divisions a fair bit. They did make an appearance in the Premier League in the late 90s, but that's their only ever time in the top flight. And in recent years, they've bobbed between the Championship and League 1, but in the last couple of years, just the last couple of years, they've established themselves in the Championship, obviously finishing in the playoffs last season. And you know what? Some optimistic Barnsley fans might think they could be in the Premier League in 5 years. Some people might say they could go down to League 1, but I think they're actually quite established in the Championship now. And my rough guess is that in 5 years' time, Barnsley will be in the Championship still. They could go up, they could go down in the next couple of years, but I very much think that they will be in the Championship come 2026. Now, obviously, they have got some decent owners. There is a little bit of investment that they can play with there, but I just think Barnsley, I think they'll be in the Championship in 5 years. Now, next up is Birmingham City. Now, they've obviously spent 10 years in the Championship now since being relegated in the 2010-2011 season from the Premier League. And in the Championship, they've only had 1 or 2 decent seasons. There was the season they came down, I believe they finished in the playoffs, and there was a rocky period when Lee Clark was the manager. They nearly got relegated. They stayed up with a Paul Caddis goal in the last minute of that season. But I think over the last season, they've just become a little bit more stable. And I think with Lee Bowyer, I don't think they're at any risk of going down. However, I really can't see Birmingham going back up into the Premier League. And if they do, would they be strong enough to stay there? They might be, I don't know. But I'm going to say in the next 5 years, Birmingham City will also be in the Championship. You might see a recurring theme through this video, guys. Honestly, a lot of these Championship teams, realistically, could still be in the Championship in the next 5 years. Now, next up is Blackburn Rovers. Obviously, they've been outside the Prem for about 10 years as well. And in the last 10 years, they have actually bounced down to League 1, but came straight back up. And with Tony Mowbray at the wheel, it's hard to say, isn't it? I thought they had a really good chance of going up last season at the very start of the season when they were flying, but obviously since then they fell away. They finished in the bottom half last season, and now they've lost Armstrong. They've lost a lot of goals, but they're still a decent team. And once again, in 5 years' time, I think Blackburn Rovers will be in the Championship. Next up is Blackpool Football Club. Now, they also have been out the Premier League for about 10 years. Obviously, they went up there in 2010 and came back down in 2011. And since then, they've been on a rollercoaster journey, those Blackpool fans. They went all the way down to League 2. And obviously, they had so many problems with their owners, fans not going to games and all that kind of stuff. But over the last couple of years, they're trending back upwards again. Now, obviously, they bounced back to League 1, and last season they bounced back to the Championship. But will they make the jump to the Premier League next? It's very hard to see Blackpool making that jump. I don't know. I think Blackpool fans would just be happy to consolidate in the Championship. So, once again, I'm going to go for Blackpool to be in the Championship. Next up then is AFC Bournemouth, and their history is quite interesting to look at. Obviously, never really been a hugely successful club, but obviously spent about 5 or 6 years in the Premier League, and they came back down to the Championship. They finished in the playoffs in their first season, and they've still got a little bit of parachute money to play with, and I think they will bounce back to the Premier League. I think the money at the club is what will bring them back, but it's very hard to see if they'd establish themselves in the Premier League again. In the next 5 years, they might bounce to the Premier League and bounce back down to the Championship. So it's very hard to predict where they're going to be in 5 years. I'm just going to be nice and say Bournemouth will be in the Premier League in 5 years' time. I just think the parachute money, the quality of players that they've still got, I think they could be up there. Next up is Bristol City, a team that's been in the Championship for about 6 or 7 years now. They've actually established themselves. However, in the last 2 seasons, I think they've declined a little bit. They finished a little bit lower in the 2019-20 season compared to the season before. And then last year, a real fall away, and they just stayed up in the end. And they haven't got off to the best start to this season. And do you know what? I'm going to be mean. I'm going to say Bristol City might be in League 1 come 5 years' time. Now, obviously, as a club, they've obviously grown since they were last in League One. The stadium's had an extension and their fans are actually really good, but they haven't been in the top flight since the 80s, and it's really hard to see where Bristol City will go over the next 5 years. If you'd asked me 3 or 4 years ago, I'd have probably said Premier League for Bristol City, as they were really on the up. But like I say, in the last couple of seasons, they've just been trending downwards again, and it's really hard to say. I'm just going to be a bit mean there and go for Bristol City to be in League One. Now, next up, you've got the Welsh team, Cardiff City, who've obviously made 2 appearances in the Premier League within the last 10 years. And the thing is, I've noticed with them, whenever they're in the Championship, they're always in and around that top half, aren't they? And usually in and around the playoffs as well. So I think if they're going to be in the Championship in 5 years' time, they'll definitely be still fighting to get in the Premier League. But I could see Cardiff City making an appearance in the Premier League. And I'm going to say, come 2026, Cardiff City will be in the Premier League. It's hard to say if Cardiff City will establish themselves, because usually when they're in the Prem, they do bounce back. But I don't know. I think they could be in and around the Prem. Next up, my team, Coventry City. Now, some optimistic fans might say Coventry City are on our way back up to the Premier League. I would agree to an extent. Obviously, we went down to League 2 and we've bounced all the way back to the Championship, which is an absolutely incredible achievement considering the off-the-field issues. And I'd like to think that the off-the-field issues shouldn't really be a thing anymore. I think Coventry City are on the rise. In 5 years' time, hopefully, we'll be getting close to having our own stadium. On the pitch, it's hard to see us get into the Premier League, to be honest, without the investment. I think Mark Robinson's doing an amazing job, but let's remember he's got a shoestring budget, and I think now we're in the Championship, we are really realising that it is very hard to make that jump, and I think you need money in being realistic to get to the Premier League. So I don't think we'll slide back down. I think while Mark Robbins is here, we are on the up, but to get to the Premier League, it's a big ask. So I'm going to say Coventry City will be in the Championship come 2026. Let me know down below what your thoughts are on your club in the comments. Now, next up is Derby County. I believe the team that's been in the Championship for the longest amount of time, them or Forest. And yeah, Derby County, really bad problems off the pitch at the moment, and obviously haven't got off to a dream start to the Championship season. They picked up a draw against Huddersfield, lost to Peterborough with 2 injury time goals. They just about stayed up last season, but I think if you put the off-the-field issues into the equation, then Derby County are heading down the divisions. I'm going to put them in League One. They could sort things out. Obviously, they've got Wayne Rooney. They've got a couple of decent players, actually. And I think if they can stay up this season, they give themselves a massive boost in becoming a better club over the next couple of years and being more stable. But I think they will go down this year, and it's hard to see how they bounce back to the Championship with all those issues at Derby County. But good luck to them nonetheless. Next up, Fulham Football Club, a team that seems to be bouncing between the Premier League and the Championship in recent years. So I really could flip a coin and stick them anywhere between the Prem and Championship. It's I feel like with Norwich, Fulham and West Bromwich Albion, you could put them anywhere between these two. I'm going to be nice and say Fulham will be in the Premier League come 2026. I think they're always just a bit too strong for the Championship. A couple of years ago, they had a couple of seasons where they finished in the bottom half in the Championship, but in recent years they've just been continuously finishing in the top half of the Championship, and I think they'll bounce back to the Premier League. Next up, Huddersfield Town, a team that were obviously in the Premier League a few years ago, but since coming down to the Championship they really haven't done well to bounce back at all, have they? They've just been finishing in the bottom half, and it's not very encouraging for the Huddersfield fans. I don't think they're too happy with their manager. I think the recent results haven't been great, to be honest. They lost 5-1 to Fulham at the weekend of the time of recording this, and do you know what? I think in the next 5 years they could slide down to League One as well. I think they, as a club, they can be quite erratic. They've bounced up and down over the years, but I'm going to say in 5 years' time Huddersfield will be in League One. Next up, Hull City, a team that's also a bit erratic. They've been bouncing up and down the divisions over the last few years. Obviously made a couple of appearances in the Premier League, but last season obviously played in League One. I think it was so important for them to bounce back at the first attempt. It really does show that as a club and as a team they were just too strong for League One, but it's really important they stay up this season and don't bounce back down to League One. Hull City, it's hard to say, to be honest. I'm going to go for the Championship. I think they could make another appearance in the Premier League at any point, but you know, we've seen them slide down to League One, so they're a club which could go in absolutely any direction, so I will just leave them in the Championship for now. Next up, Luton Town, a team that have done so well over recent years. Remember, they were in the National League not long ago, and they bounced from the National League to the Championship within about 5 or 6 seasons, which is an incredible achievement. But now they're in the Championship, a bit like I said with Coventry, you really need the investment to then get the next step and bounce to the Premier League. And do Luton Town have that investment? Maybe not. I don't think they're the richest club in the Championship. Obviously, they're trying to build a new stadium, which would be great. I think they really need that, a bigger stadium, and obviously it'd bring in more funds. But I can't see them sliding back down the divisions. I think Luton Town have really established themselves, and I'm going to say, yeah, I'm going to go for the Championship for Luton Town. I just can't see them going up to the Premier League. I just don't know if they're good enough, but I don't think they'll go down to League One in the next few years. Next up, Middlesbrough Football Club. If you look at their history, they always bounce between the Premier League and the Championship. So once again, you could flip a coin between the Prem and the Championship, but I think that's really good. You know, if you look at a lot of these clubs, they've all spent a bit of time in League One or League Two or whatever, but Middlesbrough always seem to be in the Prem or the Championship, and I'm gonna say they'll make it to the Prem. I think in the Championship they're always one of the strong teams, and yeah, I think there'll be a season coming up, especially with Neil Warnock, where they could get promoted. Now that said, they could come straight back down if they were to go up, but I'm going to be nice to Middlesbrough and say they'll be in the Prem come 2026. Next up, we go to the Den, Millwall Football Club, who I believe are spending their 5th season now in the Championship since being promoted from League One, and I'm going to be boring and just say they'll be in the Championship come 2026. I think they've really established themselves in the Championship. They haven't really looked like going down in any season, so yeah, they're doing really well. Some of their fans might be optimistic and say we could get to the Premier League, and I think it's a real possibility because they do keep finishing in and around the top half, but I think I'm going to put Millwall in the Championship in the next 5 years. Next up, Nottingham Forest, who have obviously been outside the Premier League since 1999, which feels like a long time ago now. That's the year I was born, 22 years ago. And it's really hard to see how they're going to get back up there. Obviously, as a club, you always say they're a big club, but the years are rolling by now and they still haven't made an appearance in the Premier League since the 90s. But a bit like Leeds, you know, they spent a long time out of the Premier League, and it was always a matter of time until they got back up. Do I feel that way about Forest? I do. I think at some point they will definitely make an appearance in the Premier League, but I'm not sure if it'll be in the next 5 years. I don't think they'll go down to League One. They've been in the Championship for quite a long time now. I think they're too strong for that. I'm going to say Forest will also be in the Championship in the next 5 years. Next up is Peterborough United, the Posh, who obviously came up from League One last season, obviously did an amazing achievement getting promoted. But if you look at their history, they're always bouncing straight back down every time they come up to the Championship. Not quite good enough to establish themselves. Now, obviously, they've given themselves a real opportunity to stay up this season. They picked up a win already against Derby County, and they're desperate to stay up in their first season. But like I say, I don't know if as a club they're good enough to stay up in the Championship. I think they could do this year, but in the next 5 years it's going to be really hard for them to consolidate. So I'm going to be a bit mean and say Peterborough are going to bounce back down to League One and be there in the next 5 years. Next up, Preston North End, a team that haven't been in the top flight since the 60s, a really old traditional football club, a team I've got quite a bit of respect for, to be honest, but in the last couple of years, it's just become a little bit stale in the Championship. I think they've been a really decent team. They kept finishing in and around the playoffs, but not quite sneaking into the top 6 on a regular basis. Now, based on last season, it just seems like they're going to fall away a little bit, and they could fall as far as League One. And yeah, I'm going to go for that as a prediction. I think Preston could get relegated. With McAvoy as the manager, I'm just not sure, and they haven't got off to the great start of this season. I'm going to say Preston are going to fall down to League One. Next up is Queen's Park Rangers, a team that I predict to make the top 6 this season, and a team I think will probably bounce to the Premier League in the next 5 years. However, I think when they do, they probably will come back down, because as you'll see looking at QPR's history, whenever they're in the top flight, they never do that well. I think they've only stayed up one season out of the last sort of 3 or 4 seasons they've had in the top flight, and yeah, I just don't know with QPR. I think they could bounce to the top flight but come back down, so I'm going to predict they'll be in the Championship. Too good for League One in my opinion, but maybe not quite good enough for the Premier League. Next up, Reading Football Club, and I'm going to go for the same. I think they're going to be in the Championship in the next 5 years. Obviously, since they've come down from the Premier League about 8 or 9 years ago, they've really had up and down moments in the Championship, but in general, just seem suited to the Championship. I don't think Reading seem to be good enough to get to the Premier League or at least stay up there, but then just a bit too strong to go down to League One. So another club where I don't know. I think I'm just going to go for the Championship. Next up, you've got Stoke City, who've obviously been in the Championship for a few years now. And when they came down, initially, I thought, yeah, they'll bounce straight back up. But they haven't, and the years are starting to tick by. And I think they'll be in the Championship in the next 5 years as well. A bit boring from me, but I'm going to go for Stoke City to be in the Championship. I just think with Stoke City that they really needed to bounce back when the parachute payments were coming in, and now they've run out. I don't know. I think, once again, too good for League One, but will they get back to the Championship? They could do. They could do this season. Who knows? But I'm going to say Championship for them in 5 years. Next up, Sheffield United, a club that have been quite erratic over recent years. I remember them being in League One when my team Coventry were in League One and obviously went up to the Premier League. That first season in the Premier League, they were absolutely fantastic. And then a really bad case of second season syndrome. They've got parachute payments coming in. They really need them to work. They really need to bounce back at some point. And I'm going to be nice. Sheffield United, I do think as a club, they're a very big club. I think they will bounce back, but it needs to be in the next couple of years. Otherwise, they could waste away in the Championship. Next up, Swansea City, who are obviously another team that were relegated from the Premier League within the last 5 years. I'm going to go for the Championship again. Another team who didn't make the most of their parachute payments, and yeah, they could bounce back up. They keep finishing in and around the playoffs in the Championship, but I don't know. If they get up, do they stay up? You'll have to let me know down below, Swansea fans. And then the last club is West Bromwich Albion, and oh God, if you look at their history, they just bounce between the Premier League and the Championship. They're a club that really can't seem to decide which league they want to be in. I think if you look at their history, they've spent most of their time in the top division as a club. I'm just going to back them to be in the Premier League come 2026. I think if you compare them to other yo-yo clubs, they're a little bit better than them because West Bromwich Albion don't always come straight back down. They sometimes have a couple of seasons in the Premier League before coming back down. And I think West Bromwich Albion will bounce back. And yeah, I think they'll be in the Premier League come 2026. So then guys, that wraps up today's video. Let me know what you think down below in the comments. Let me know what your predictions are for your own club. Make sure you've all left a like, subscribed if you're new, and we'll see you in the next video. Peace out.